In another age long before the Imperium, there was a world that believed in heroes. Among them rose two men, one who gave and one who took. The first carried a power called One for All. A light passed from soul to soul. The second was All for One, who stole the gifts of others and built an empire upon their suffering. For centuries he ruled that world through fear, bending heroes to his will, twisting children into weapons and calling his dominion peace. He was a god in all but name, until the day he was struck down by All Might, the last bearer of that selfless light. But death could not erase what he was. When his flesh was broken and his world fell into myth, the warp remembered him. It took the echo of his hunger, the perfection of his control, and gave it new form, not as a man, but as an idea. Now, within the screaming sea of the Imperium, that idea awakens again. It does not roar, it whispers. And those who hear it forget how to suffer. In the 41st millennium, they will not call him All for One. They will call him Dominus Nihil. Inquisitorial Dossier Header. This document bears the mark M. Null 98923 Obscurus and carries a classification of Extremis Hereticus with Warp Anomaly designation. Access is restricted to inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus exclusively. Unauthorized viewing will result in immediate mind erasure protocols. The events herein concern Segmentum Obscurus, specifically the region now designated as the Quiet Choir Cluster, formerly known as the Scintillan Reach, before the primary phenomenon manifested. That phenomenon is a localized zone of absolute warp silence, colloquially termed the Silent Sea. The records of Explorator Fleet Sigma 9 mark this entry in the year 998 MA 41 at a position 12.7 light-years from Forge World Veneris 9th. The fleet's ordained objective to survey and catalog an anomalous stellar formation that had drawn the attention of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The augur arrays sang their warnings in binary cant, but tech priest Erisar had learned to distrust the song. For 3 weeks, Explorator Fleet Sigma 9 had pursued a gravitational anomaly that should not exist, a pocket of space where warp currents ran smooth as machine steel, where the screaming chaos of the Imperium fell silent like a servitor with its vox grill removed. Magos Erisar stood in the observation deck of the Herald of Providence, his mechadendrites twitching in rhythms that expressed unease through the Mechanicus cant. Before him, the void displayed an impossibility. The region ahead registered on every scanner as space itself unremarkable in composition standard and radiation output. Yet the warp was wrong. Magos, his acolyte Theta 7 intoned photoreceptors flickering amber with confusion. The Geller field generators report 93% power reduction. Optimal efficiency suggests full shutdown. Erisar's biological eye, the one concession to flesh he'd retained from his transformation, narrowed. The Geller fields protected ships from the predations of the warp during translation shields against demons and the howling madness between stars. To suggest their deactivation was to invite possession, corruption, death. Yet the math was pure. The warp here exerted no pressure. No demonic entities scratched at reality's membrane. The Imperium lay flat, featureless like an ocean of glass beneath a sunless sky. "Log the readings," Erisar commanded. "Transmit to Veneris 9 on all channels. Priority Augur Maximus." They descended into the anomaly over the next 72 hours. With each passing day, the ship's machine spirits grew quieter. The rhythmic chants of the enginarium faded to whispers. The hum of plasma coils smoothed into a tone so even it stopped being sound at all. It became engineered stillness. The crew noticed. Tech adepts moved through their rituals with decreasing fervor. The prayer oils remained unapplied. The incense burned without being replenished. No one spoke of it. There seemed nothing to say. On the third day, Erisar stood again at the observation deck. This time, he was not alone. The figure wore a mask of dark metal, smooth and featureless, save for the angular contours that suggested a face without confirming one. Robes of indeterminate colors shifted in the recycled air, and where the figure stood, even the distant thrumming of the ship's heart seemed to pause, as if listening. Erisar's augmetic systems registered no life signs, no heat signature, no electromagnetic field. His biological eye saw a man. His mechanical sensors saw nothing at all. "Identification query," Erisar said, though his Vox grill produced the words more softly than intended. "Authorization codes required." The masked figure tilted its head, a gesture almost curious. When it spoke, the voice emerged from everywhere and nowhere, a sound that bypassed the ears and settled directly into thought. "You do not need to ask questions anymore, Magos Erisar. I have brought you efficiency beyond prayer, communion beyond ritual. Your machine spirits no longer scream their needs because I have given them peace." Erisar felt something loosen in his chest and the few organic parts that remained beneath augmetics and steel. The constant background noise of his internal systems, the click of servo motors, the whisper of coolant, the electric hum of cogitator implants, all of it faded. It was, he realized with dawning horror, and something disturbingly close to rapture, perfect. "What are you?" he managed. The figure extended one hand. In the palm was a small hole, a void darker than the space beyond the viewport. "I am the answer to the warp's question. I am what comes after suffering. Tell me, Magos, when was the last time you truly heard silence?" Erisar opened his mouth to respond. Found he had no words. Found he no longer wanted them. Behind him, the bridge crew continued their stations in perfect, terrible quiet. The machine spirits no longer sang. And somewhere in the depths of the ship, the astropathic choir fell silent mid-transmission, their last message to Veneris 9, truncating into static. The Herald of Providence drifted deeper into the anomaly. 72 hours later, it ceased all transmissions. When recovery teams arrived 3 months hence, they would find the ship intact systems, functional crew, alive and breathing. No one aboard would ever speak again. Recovery teams would later find Magos Erisar's final log entry. Its timestamp corrupted beyond recovery. The words remained intact. "It is perfect efficiency. The machine hums without worship. We have achieved communion through obedience. Emperor, forgive me. It feels good." I record this entry in my personal log, the first of what may be many, or the last I ever make. I am Inquisitor Cassiel Dre of the Ordo Malleus, and I write these words aboard the Fortress Cathedral Eternal Vigilance, maintaining high orbit above the hive world of Scintilla. I have learned to measure time by the quality of silence. There is the silence of prayer, when the faithful bow their heads in the Emperor's basilicas, and the only sound is the soft whisper of devotion. There is the silence of space, the vast nothing between stars, where humanity drifts in fragile shells of metal and faith. And then there is the silence of the warp, the pause between screams, the held breath before madness erupts like a tumor in reality's flesh. I have known all three. The last nearly destroyed me. 27 years I have served the Ordo Malleus. 27 years hunting the demons that slip through the cracks in the Emperor's light, binding them back to the hell that spawned them. I have witnessed corruption, that would drive lesser minds to gibbering madness. I have stood in ritual chambers where the walls wept blood and spoke in languages that predate human thought, but nothing prepared me for Harvest Prime. The memory surfaces unbidden, as it always does in moments of stillness. An agri-world population, 10,000 standard Imperial compliance. The distress call came fragmented, desperate. The children won't stop singing. That was all. 6 words that ended a world. By the time my kill team arrived, the warp contamination had spread through the entire colony. I could hear them, every mind, every soul caught in the writhing embrace of something from beyond the veil. The Psyker's curse, I could not close my ears to their screaming. Each plea for mercy, each prayer that went unanswered, each child's voice calling for parents already consumed. The only mercy I could offer was exterminatus. I authorized the order. I watched the cyclonic torpedoes fall. I felt 10,000 minds blink out like candles in a storm. And in the silence that followed, I heard something worse than screaming. I heard the warp laughing. That was 3 years ago. I have not truly slept since. The chirurgeon offers me dreamless drugs. I refuse. Sleep means vulnerability, and I have learned that the warp is patient. It can wait. It has eternity. But today, as I stand in the chapel of St. Culmina aboard the Eternal Vigilance, I am summoned not to rest, but to duty. The summons bore the seal of Lord Inquisitor Kairos himself. A man I have met only twice, both times in the aftermath of demonic incursions that cost entire sectors their souls. The chapel is empty save for the towering statue of the saint, her marble face serene in death. I have always found it ironic that we depict our martyrs at peace. There is no peace in service to the Emperor, only duty extended unto death and beyond. Inquisitor Dre. I turn. Lord Inquisitor Kairos emerges from the shadows like something born from them, his red-trimmed greatcoat absorbing the candlelight. His face is gaunt, skull-like, marked by augmetic surgery that replaced his eyes with cold sensors that glow faintly amber. He has looked into the warp too long, and it has looked back. My lord, I bow formal precise. Your summons mentioned a priority obscurus designation. Indeed. A servo skull descends from the vaulted ceiling at his command, its photoreceptors projecting a hololithic star chart. Are you familiar with the Scintillan Reach? Forge World's explorator routes minor mining colonies. Standard compliance last audit showed the Scintillan Reach no longer exists. His voice is flat, emotionless. It has been redesignated the Quiet Choir Cluster. 13 systems, 47 inhabited worlds. Combined population, 8 billion souls. The number sits between us like an accusation, 8 billion. More than died at Harvest Prime by 3 orders of magnitude. What happened? His hand cuts through the air and the hololithic shifts. A region of space appears marked in pulsing red. Approximately 9 months ago, Explorator Fleet Sigma 9 reported a warp anomaly near Forge World Veneris 9. Standard procedure, investigate catalog report. They entered the affected zone and ceased transmission. Warp storm. No. He pauses, and I sense the weight of what he's about to say. Silence. Absolute and total. Astropathic relay stations report that the region has become a null zone. No warp echoes. No psychic resonance. No demon manifestation. Nothing. I feel my pulse quicken. In my years hunting chaos, I have learned that silence in the warp is more terrifying than any scream. The Imperium is emotion given form. It does not simply cease. Unless you think it's a trap. I think Kyrus says carefully that something has entered our reality that understands the warp better than we do, and it is rewriting it. The hololithic flickers at his touch, displaying a grainy pict capture recovered from a probe sent into the edge of the anomaly. It shows a figure standing on what appears to be the hull of a ship floating in void, without atmosphere suit or protection. The figure wears a mask, smooth and dark, and even through the distorted image, I can feel something emanating from it. Not threat, not corruption, peace. Recovery teams found the crews of 17 ships drifting in the affected zone, Kyrus continues. All alive, all functional. None of them will speak. Medical scans show their minds are intact, but every psychological evaluation returns the same result: perfect contentment. That's impossible. Yes. He meets my gaze, those amber sensors boring into me. Which is why I need you, Cassiel. You are beta-grade psyker with specialization in empathic resonance. You hear the warp in ways our Grey Knights cannot. I need you to go into that silence and discover what dwells within it. The request sits between us. I should refuse. I should cite my psychological evaluations, the trauma from Harvest Prime, the fact that I am one nightmare away from being declared excommunicate traitoress for my fragile mental state. Instead, I hear myself say, "When do I depart?" Kyrus allows himself the ghost of a smile. Your transport is already prepared. You will be accompanied by a Grey Knights observation team led by Brother Captain Vortigern. Their orders are to observe, assess, and if necessary, cleanse. He doesn't need to specify what cleanse means. In the Inquisition, it always means the same thing. One more thing, Kyrus adds, and his voice drops to something almost gentle. The psychers we've sent to probe the anomaly, they report hearing something before the silence takes them. A voice, offering gifts, offering rest. What kind of gifts? An end to fear, an end to pain, an end to choice. He turns away, his greatcoat swirling in shadows. Be wary, Inquisitor Dre. The warp has spawned gods from humanity's emotions. What might emerge from the absence of emotion? I dare not speculate. He leaves me alone in the chapel. I stand before St. Comina's statue, her face frozen in marble serenity. For the first time in 3 years, I close my eyes and listen to the warp. And deep in the screaming chaos, beneath the laughter of thirsting gods and the howl of demons unborn, I hear something I have not heard since I was a child. Silence. It calls to me. An emperor, forgive me. I want to answer. Years later, when archivists unsealed Lord Inquisitor Kirhu's personal records, they would discover an addendum bearing his cipher. A note written after our meeting, never meant for my eyes. Subject Dre has been approved for deployment, despite significant psychological reservations documented in her file. Her empathic sensitivity makes her uniquely suited for this investigation. Perhaps the only psyker in the sector capable of hearing what dwells in that silence. However, her history with the Harvest Prime incident suggests a dangerous vulnerability to manipulation, particularly from entities that offer respite from psychic suffering. Brother Captain Vortigern has been authorized to execute Subject Dre immediately should she show signs of corruption or compromise. The Emperor protects, even if we must protect him from ourselves. 40 hours after my briefing with Lord Inquisitor Kyrus, I stood aboard Brother Captain Vortigern's strike cruiser, the Blade of Vigilance. The Grey Knight's vessel was a weapon forged for hunting demons, every bulkhead inscribed with wards, every corridor a gauntlet of psychic sanctification. It was perhaps the safest place in the Imperium for someone like me. Or so I had thought. The blade of vigilance translated into real space. With the usual violence of warp travel reality tearing itself apart to accommodate our arrival, then stitching closed behind us like a wound reluctantly healing. I felt the shift in my bones and the psychic centers of my brain, where the warp pressed against my consciousness like a hand against frosted glass. Then, for the first time in 27 years, I felt less. Not absence, not the void I'd been warned about. Simply less pressure. As though someone had opened a window in a room that had been sealed too long, letting in air I hadn't known I needed. Inquisitor. Brother Captain Vortigern stood at the entrance to my sanctum, his Terminator armor making the doorway seem suddenly small. The Grey Knight's presence was a weight unto itself, centuries of training, genetic enhancement, and unwavering faith compressed into a form that barely qualified as human anymore. We have entered the outer reaches of the affected zone. The navigator reports anomalies. I rose from my meditation circle, pulling my greatcoat around my shoulders. The fabric was lined with hexagrammic wards, each one inscribed by my own hand over years of service. Protection against the warp's predations. I wondered idly if they would matter here. What kind of anomalies? The better question. Vortigern said, his voice a rumble through his helm's Vox grill, is what is absent. The command bridge of the Blade of Vigilance was a cathedral of war on every surface inscribed with prayers and purity seals. The navigator's station occupied a raised dais at the center, where the ship's guide sat encased in protective psychic barriers. Navigator Septimus was a wiry man whose third eye was currently concealed beneath a thick bandage, as was custom outside of warp travel. He turned as we approached, and I saw immediately that something was wrong. His hands trembled. Not with fear, I would have sensed that, but with something closer to confusion. Inquisitor. Brother Captain. He gestured to the hololithic display showing our relative position. I must report a discrepancy in my readings. Explain, Vortigern commanded. Septimus touched a control, and the display shifted to show the warp's currents as he perceived them. Under normal circumstances, the Imperium appeared as a roiling sea of color and motion tides of emotion and psychic energy that navigators used to chart courses between stars. The display before us showed something else entirely. Ahead, the warp's usual chaos gradually smoothed. Like watching waves on an ocean calm as they approached a shore, except there was no shore. Just an area where the screaming madness of the Imperium became flat. Quiet. I've never seen anything like it, Septimus said. The Astronomicon is still visible, still guiding us, but ahead. He paused, searching for words. It's like someone has taken a blade and cut away all the noise. The warp is still there. I can sense it. But it's silent, I finished. He nodded. The calculations suggest we'll reach the edge of the phenomenon in approximately 14 hours. After that, he spread his hands helplessly. I felt Vortigern's gaze upon me, though his helm concealed his expression. Can you sense it? Inquisitor with your gifts. I closed my eyes and opened my inner senses, the psychic awareness that made me both valuable and vulnerable to the Inquisition. The warp rushed in, as it always did, a torrent of emotion, thought, and barely contained madness. I heard the distant echoes of a billion minds across the sector, their hopes and fears and prayers bleeding into the Imperium like blood into water. But ahead there was something else. Imagine standing in a storm, rain and wind battering you from all sides, thunder drowning out thought itself. Then imagine someone offering you shelter, not emptiness, not death, Just peace. The absence of chaos. The end of noise. I opened my eyes. I can sense it. And I understand why the others never returned. Corruption. Vortigern's hand moved fractionally toward his nemesis force sword. No. I shook my head. Seduction. Whatever is in there, it's not forcing anyone. It's offering them something they desperately want. Release from the warp's torment. That is corruption by another name. Perhaps. I turned back to the hololithic display. Or perhaps it's something we're not equipped to understand. The warp is fed by emotion, passion, rage, desire, despair. What happens to a region of space where those emotions are removed? Septimus shuddered. The navigators have a legend, an old story from before the Emperor walked among us. They speak of the dead calm, a place where warp currents cease entirely. Ships that entered were never seen again. Not destroyed, just becalmed, drifting forever in a sea without wind. Superstition, Vortigern said flatly. Maybe. I studied the display. Or maybe they encountered this before and failed to stop it. The next 14 hours passed in uneasy anticipation. I spent them in my sanctum, preparing my mind for what lay ahead. I reviewed the reports from the ships that had been recovered, the ones whose crews now sat in medici facilities, alay but unreachable, their minds intact but completely, utterly content. I read Magos Erisar's final transmission again and again. It feels good. 3 words that should have been a warning. Instead, I found them disturbingly tempting. The warp had been screaming in my head since I was 12 years old, when my psychic talents first manifested. I had learned to live with it, to function despite the constant background noise of humanity's suffering. But I had never learned to escape it. What would silence feel like, Inquisitor? Vortigern's voice through the Vox shattered my reverie. We are approaching the boundary. You should see this. I returned to the bridge to find the crew staring at the forward viewport in something approaching religious awe. Outside space looked normal. Stars shone with their usual cold light. The void stretched black and infinite, but I could feel it. The pressure in my mind was fading like a migraine, slowly releasing its grip. The constant whisper of the warp, the background radiation of psychic energy that pervaded all of real space, was diminishing. Geller field status, I asked. 92% power reduction recommended. The engineer reported her voice uncertain. The field is unnecessary. There is no warp pressure to repel. Maintain full power, Vortigern ordered. Until we understand what we face, we take no chances. But I knew it was already too late for caution. We had crossed the threshold. Behind us, the warp still raged. Ahead was silence. And in that silence, I heard something I had not heard in 15 years. My own thoughts, clear and undisturbed by the psychic screaming of the Imperium. The children of Harvest Prime were finally quiet. No more pleas for help, no dying prayers, no laughter from the warp. It was, I realized with dawning horror and undeniable relief, exactly what I had been searching for. Emperor, preserve us, Septimus whispered. The warp, it's not gone. It's just... He struggled for words. Asleep, I said softly. The warp is asleep. And somewhere in that sleep, something was dreaming. The ship's auger logs would later reveal a recording captured at 14 hours, 23 minutes, and 7 seconds after we crossed the boundary. Source unknown. The recording contained only silence for 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Then, barely audible, a voice spoke, not one voice, but many speaking, as one layered in an unholy harmony. It was impossible to identify as male or female, human or Xenos, real or psychic impression, as if every word carried the echo of countless others beneath it. Technical analysis could not determine whether this was an external Vox transmission or a psychic intrusion recorded only by my neural implants. The voice said, "Welcome, Cassiel Dre. I have been waiting for you. Your mind is loud with suffering. Let me teach you the gift of silence." The recording ended there. All attempts to trace the source failed. More troubling, when questioned, I confirmed hearing the message, but could not recall whether I heard it with my ears or my mind. The blade of vigilance drifted through space like a cathedral through fog. Outside the viewports, stars burned with their usual cold fire. But something fundamental had changed. The universe felt hollow, as though reality itself had been scooped out and replaced with a perfect replica that lacked some essential quality. I stood in my sanctum trying to meditate, but meditation required the discipline to quiet one's mind. My mind was already quiet. Too quiet. For 27 years, the warp had been a constant presence, a pressure behind my eyes, a whisper at the edge of hearing, the psychic equivalent of tinnitus. I had learned to filter it to function, despite the endless background noise of humanity's collective suffering bleeding through the Imperium. Now that noise was gone, I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt amputated. "Inquisitor." The Vox crackled. Brother Captain Vortigern's voice. "Your presence is required on the bridge. We have located Veneris 9. I made my way through the ship's corridors, noting the changes in the crew. They moved through their duties with mechanical precision, but something was missing from their movements. The small inefficiencies, the moments of hesitation, the tiny human errors that marked living beings, all smoothed away into perfect, terrible efficiency. The Geller field still hummed at full power, but I could feel its irrelevance. There was nothing to repel. The warp pressed against real space like water against a dam. But here in this pocket of existence, the pressure had ceased. The bridge crew stood at their stations in eerie synchronization. Navigator Septimus had removed the bandage from his third eye, an act normally forbidden outside of warp navigation, and stared ahead with an expression I could only describe as wonder. "Navigator," I said sharply. "Report." He didn't respond immediately. When he finally turned to face me, his warp eye wept tears of clear fluid. "I can see," he whispered. "I have never known the warp without its screaming. But here I am free of it." Vortigern moved between us, his Terminator armor's servos growling. His hand went to his Nemesis Force Sword. Under any other circumstances, he would have executed Septimus for exposing his third eye on an active bridge. But his hand hesitated, stopped. The absolute certainty that should have guided a Grey Knight's judgment wavered. "Navigator Septimus," Vortigern said, and I heard the effort it took to keep his voice level. "You will compose yourself and deliver your report. Now." The threat in his voice broke through Septimus's reverie. He blinked, wiped his face, and turned to the hololithic display. "Veneris 9 is 3 million kilometers ahead. The Forge World's auger stations are not responding to hails. Orbital traffic appears stationary." The display showed what he meant. Dozens of ships' cargo haulers, ore processors, explorator vessels hung in perfect formation around the planet, not drifting, not maneuvering. Simply there, like insects preserved in amber. "Life signs?" I asked. "Positive across all vessels," the augur officer reported. Her voice was flat and motionless. "Atmospheric processors functioning. Power cores stable. But no Vox traffic. No course corrections. No thruster activity." I studied the frozen fleet. Each ship was intact, functional, alive in every technical sense. Yet something essential had been removed from them. Purpose, direction, will. "The Forge world itself," Vortigern demanded. "Status." The hololithic zoomed to show Veneris 9, a world of rust-red continents and gray seas, its surface covered in the sprawling manufactorums and temple forges of the Adeptus Mechanicas. From orbit, it looked normal. Atmospheric processors still functioned. Plasma reactors still burned. The eternal factories still turned. But there were no ships launching. No traffic between orbital stations and surface facilities. No vox chatter of Benaric cant as tech priests coordinated their endless labors. Veneris 9 was a world of machines running on autopilot tended by caretakers who had forgotten why they cared. "We need to investigate the surface," I said. "The Explorator fleet's last transmission originated from Forge Cathedral Primus. If Magos Erisar is still there, we may be able to extract answers. If he has not been compromised," Vortigern added darkly. "When," I corrected. "When he was compromised. The question is whether anything remains of him to interrogate." Vortigern considered this. "Very well. I will lead an assault team to the surface. You will remain aboard the Blade where—" "No." I cut him off, meeting his helm's eye lenses. "I am the only psyker aboard capable of sensing what has happened here. You need me on the surface." The Lord Inquisitor's orders were explicit. "You are not to be placed in unnecessary danger." And his deeper order, I said quietly, was for you to execute me if I become compromised. That order remains valid whether I'm on this ship or on that planet. The only difference is whether I provide useful intelligence before you fulfill your duty." A long silence stretched between us. Finally, Vortigern inclined his head fractionally. "You will remain within my line of sight at all times. Should I perceive the slightest indication of corruption or compromise, you'll put a bolt round through my skull. I understand perfectly." 2 hours later, I stood in the embarkation deck as Thunderhawk gunships prepared for deployment. 5 Grey Knights would accompany us, fewer than I'd hoped. But Vortigern insisted on maintaining a garrison aboard the Blade in case we failed to return. Brother Cassian approached me as I performed final checks on my bolt pistol. The Grey Knight's armor bore the scars of countless demon slayings, each mark a prayer of victory. "Inquisitor," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle for a being of such martial purpose. "A question, if I may. Speak. Can you still sense the warp, even here in this silence?" I paused, considering the question. I reached out with my psychic senses, pushing past the comfortable numbness that had settled over my mind since we entered the silent sea. And I felt it. Distant, muted like a scream heard through water, but present. The warp still existed. It still raged with the emotions of humanity's countless trillions. But here in this pocket of space, something had placed a barrier between us and that cosmic storm. Not a Geller field. Those were crude instruments, walls of forced reality that kept the warp at bay through brute psychic force. This was different. This was consent. As though the warp itself had agreed to be quiet here. "I can sense it," I told Cassian, "but it's like hearing thunder from inside a cathedral. The storm still rages, but someone has closed the doors. And this troubles you. Yes, because in my experience, brother, when a door closes in the warp, something is always waiting on the other side. The Thunderhawk descent was uneventful, which itself was unsettling. Veneris 9's orbital defense platforms tracked our approach, but did not challenge us. Surface-to-orbit Lance batteries remained offline. We could have been a Chaos war fleet arriving to rape the world, and the Forge World's vaunted defenses would have simply watched. We touched down in the primary landing bay of Forge Cathedral Primus, a structure large enough to house a Titan Legion. The bay was occupied dozens of cargo haulers, servitor transporters, and tech priest shuttles filled the vast space. All empty, all silent. Our boots echoed on the metal decking as we advanced. The Grey Knights moved with tactical precision, their nemesis force weapons ready. I kept my psychic senses open, searching for any hint of corruption, possession, or demonic presence. Nothing. Just the overwhelming, suffocating absence of the warp's usual chaos. We found the first bodies, if they could be called that, in the main processional corridor. 37 tech priests, each standing at perfect attention, their augmetic eyes glowing softly in the dim light. Their mechadendrites hung motionless. Their respiratory system cycled air with metronomic regularity. "Are they alive?" I asked. Brother Cassian approached the nearest one, a tech priest whose body was more machine than flesh. He waved a hand before its eyes. No reaction. He pressed his gauntlet against its shoulder. No flinch. "Biologically functional," Cassian reported, "but mentally absent." I reached out with my empathic senses, touching the tech priest's mind, and found peace. Not the void of death, not the writhing corruption of chaos, just serene, perfect, absolute peace. The tech priest's thoughts moved in precise patterns, solving equations, processing data, maintaining system logs. But beneath that surface, I sensed faint patterns, algorithms grafted onto thought itself as if another consciousness had rewritten their neural hymn. They functioned more efficiently now, as though their flaws had been surgically excised and replaced with precision. But there was no desire, no ambition, no fear or hope or faith, no humanity. "They're still in there," I whispered, "but they've been edited. All the parts that suffer, that struggle, that question removed. What's left is just the function, the machine without the ghost." "Heresy," Vortigern breathed. "The cult Mechanicus teaches that flesh is weak, but even they do not advocate the complete removal of the soul." "This isn't removal," I said, pulling my hand back from the tech priest's cold metal skull. "This is improvement. At least that's how they perceive it. They're not dead. They're not enslaved. They're simply content." And that, I realized with creeping horror, was far more dangerous than any demon. We moved deeper into the Forge Cathedral, passing through chambers of silent machinery and corridors lined with motionless servitors. Everything functioned, nothing lived. Then in the central sanctum, where Magos Erisar would have held court, we found him. He stood before a massive cogitator, array his mechadendrites, interfacing with a dozen data ports simultaneously. The sanctum's walls were covered in calculations, not the usual binaric cant, but something else. Equations I couldn't read in a mathematical language that seemed to describe the shape of silence itself. "Magos Erisar," I called out. "By the authority of the Ordo Malleus, I command you to respond." His head turned slowly, servo motors whirring softly. When he spoke, his vox grill produced words with perfect emotionless clarity. "Inquisitor Cassiel Dre, Designation: Beta-grade Psyker Empath Specialist. Psychological profile indicates trauma from Harvest Prime incident. Probability of receptiveness to the gift: 93.7%. My blood ran cold. I had never told anyone outside the Inquisition about Harvest Prime. The files were sealed under Kirhus's personal cipher. Even most of my own kill team didn't know the details. Yet this hollowed-out shell of a tech priest was reciting my deepest shame as though reading a maintenance log. What gift? I managed, forcing the words past the tightness in my throat. Freedom from suffering. Efficiency without worship. He has shown us the way beyond the false omniscience doctrine. We have achieved the machine god's true intent perfection through silence. He, Vortigern demanded, identify this entity. Erisar's photoreceptors brightened, and for a moment I sensed something else looking through his eyes. Something vast and patient and utterly alien to concepts like mercy or malice. He is what remains when gods are unnecessary. He is the answer to questions you have not yet learned to ask. He is... The lights in the sanctum dimmed. The temperature dropped. And from every speaker, every vox grill, every servo skull in the chamber, a voice emerged. Not loud, not threatening, just present. Present. I am here, Inquisitor Dre, and I have waited so very long to meet you. I turned and saw him for the first time with my own eyes, rather than through picked captures and reports. The masked figure stood in the chamber's entrance where no door had opened. His robes absorbed light like a wound in space, and where he stood, I felt the warp retreat. Not flee, not fight. Simply step aside as one might step aside for something that deserved passage. You cannot be here, Vortigern snarled, raising his nemesis force sword. Psychic fire wreathed the blade. This chamber is warded with the Emperor's own blessings. No demon, no witch, no... I am none of those things, the figure said gently. I am simply necessary, as is this conversation. His mask turned toward me, and though it had no eyes, I felt his gaze. Felt it reach into the parts of me that still heard the children of Harvest Prime screaming. Tell me, Cassiel, he said, using my name with casual intimacy. When was the last time you slept without dreaming? And Emperor, forgive me. I couldn't remember. Brother Captain Vortigern's armored databanks would later yield an encrypted combat log, sealed for the Grand Master's eyes only. It read, First contact with the entity designated Dominus Nihil occurred at 2247 Standard. Entity displays no demonic signatures, no warp taint, no psychic aggression. Subject Dre showed immediate psychological vulnerability to entity's presence. Recommend immediate extraction and mind-cleansing protocols. However, entity has not attacked, has not threatened, has merely talked. I do not know which is more dangerous. The silence that followed his question was not empty. It was full heavy with the weight of years I had spent running from sleep, from dreams, from the voices that would not stop screaming, even when their owners were ash, scattered across a dead world. I asked you a question, Cassiel. The masked figure took a step closer, and I felt Brother Cassian tense beside me, his nemesis force sword crackling with suppressed psychic energy. The mask itself was no mere covering. It pulsed faintly with each word, as if breathing, as if feeding on and being fed by unseen voices. Yet the weapon's usual silver fire seemed dimmed here, as though the righteous fury that powered it had been dampened. Stand down, Vortigern commanded, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. I had served alongside Grey Knights long enough to recognize the difference between a warrior who knows he can win and one who merely hopes. "I don't sleep," I said finally. My voice sounded small in the vast chamber swallowed by the perfect acoustics of Mechanicus engineering. "Not since Harvest Prime. 3 years, 2 months, 17 days. Dominus Nihil's voice held neither mockery nor pity. He stated it as fact, the way one might note the temperature or atmospheric pressure. "You take stimulants, obscura derivatives mixed with sacred promethium extract. You tell the chirurgeon it is for enhanced psychic awareness during investigations. In truth, you are afraid of what you will hear when your conscious mind releases its grip." My hands clenched into fists. I had never told anyone the exact count. Not Kirhus, not my confessor. The number lived only in my head, marking each sleepless night like a prisoner scratching days onto a cell wall. "How do you—" "Because I am listening." He gestured to the frozen tech priests around us, to Magos Erisar still interfaced with his cogitators. "I hear what they cannot bear to speak. The machine spirits of this world sing their truths to me, every log entry, every sealed file, every prayer whispered into the dark by souls who thought no one was listening." "You're reading their minds," Vortigern accused. "Psychic intrusion, violation of the Emperor's sovereign will." "No." The figure turned slightly toward the Grey Knight. "I am not taking anything from them, Brother Captain. I am removing their burden. Tell me, when was the last time you truly felt his presence? Not the ritual certainty, not the indoctrinated faith. When did you last feel the Emperor's love as more than an article of creed?" Vortigern's hand moved to his Nemesis Force sword, but I saw the hesitation, the crack in his absolute conviction. "You dare speak of the Emperor?" His words were thunder, but the lightning was missing. "I dare speak truth." Dominus Nihil spread his hands. In his left palm, that void the small dark hole through which I realized, with creeping horror, he took what he wanted. "Your Emperor sits dying on his throne. For 10,000 years he has consumed 1,000 souls daily just to maintain a flicker of consciousness. You call this mercy? You call this purpose? I call it the greatest cruelty your species has ever perpetrated, not against the psychers fed to him, but against him." "Heresy," Brother Cassian roared, stepping forward. His training demanded he strike. Every oath he had sworn, every demon he had banished, every heretic he had purged. All of it screamed that this blasphemy required immediate violent answer. His hand tightened on his Nemesis Force sword, but the absolute certainty that should have driven the blade forward wavered. For one terrible heartbeat, Brother Cassian found himself questioning not the truth of his faith, but the weight of it. And in that moment of doubt, he froze. "Is it?" The masked figure did not move, did not raise his voice. "Your Emperor created you to serve humanity's survival. Yet humanity survives not because of joy, not because of hope, but because you have weaponized their suffering. The Imperium grinds souls into paste and calls it sacrament. I offer them peace." I found my voice, though it felt like speaking through water. Peace through submission, through the removal of will. No Cassiel. And there was something almost gentle in how he said my name. Peace through the removal of fear. Look at Magos Erisar. He still thinks. He still creates. He still serves his function. But he no longer suffers the anxiety of inadequacy. He no longer fears the judgment of his peers, the wrath of his superiors, the possibility of failure. He's not human anymore. I whispered. Was he human before? Dominus Nihil tilted his head. His brain was 82% augmetic. His emotions were already modulated by hormonal regulators. His thoughts were assisted by cogitator implants. The Mechanicus had already made him more machine than man. I simply completed the work they began. I removed the last inefficiency suffering. You cannot separate humanity from suffering, Vortigern said, but even I could hear the uncertainty bleeding into his words. To feel pain is to be alive. To struggle is to serve. This is the Emperor's truth. And what, Dominus Nihil asked softly, has that truth cost you? The silence that followed was answer enough. I stepped forward, forcing myself to meet his eyeless mask. You said you were listening. Then listen to this. I authorized the exterminatus of Harvest Prime. 10,000 souls. Men, women, children, all of them screaming for mercy as the warp tore through their minds. I could hear every prayer, every plea, every child crying for parents who were already lost. I know, he said. Then you know I would do it again. Because the alternative was worse. Because sometimes humanity survives only through terrible choices. You offer peace, but peace is not the same as salvation. Salvation! The word seemed to amuse him. Tell me, Inquisitor, what is humanity being saved for? To serve an emperor who can no longer guide them, to fight wars that will never end, to live in fear of the warp of Xenos, of each other, of their own thoughts. He moved closer, and I felt at the edges of the silent sea lapping at my consciousness. The promise of quiet, of rest. I offer no lies, Cassiel. I do not promise victory. I do not promise glory. I offer only what you have sought every night for 3 years, silence. The voices will stop. The children will stop calling. You will finally truly be at peace. My hand went to my bolt pistol. Vortigern was already raising his sword. But Dominus Nihil made no move to defend himself. You could kill this body, he said calmly. But the gift has already spread. 47 worlds, 8 billion souls, all of them choosing peace over suffering. Can you kill them all? Inquisitor, another exterminatus, another 10,000 voices in your head, another sleepless millennium. The Imperium will not allow this to spread. Vortigern said, his voice regaining some of its steel. The Silent Sea will be quarantined. Every ship in this sector will be purged. Will they? The figure gestured to the frozen tech priests, to the silent ships in orbit, to the vast machinery of the Forge world, humming along without prayer or passion. Your brothers in orbit, ask them how they feel about pulling the trigger. Ask them if the weight of their faith has not grown lighter. I felt Vortigern's hesitation like a physical thing. Felt it echo through the Vox link, through the Terminator armor's machine spirit, through the very air between us. This is not corruption, Dominus Nihil continued. There are no demons here, no mutations, no pacts with the dark gods. I am not Chaos Inquisitor Dre. I am what comes after, order without tyranny, peace without weakness, humanity perfected. Humanity without humanity, I said. Humanity without suffering, he corrected. Is that not what the Emperor wanted? Is that not what every prayer asks for? Deliverance from pain, safety from the warp, an end to fear. He extended his hand toward me. The void in his palm seemed to pulse with its own rhythm, breathing, feeding, sustained by something unseen. "I can take away what hurts most and give back what you truly need," he said. "Strength, clarity, the ability to serve without being destroyed by service. I can give you that, Cassiel, right now." The children will stop screaming. Harvest Prime will become just data tragic, but no longer a wound that bleeds every night. You will remember everything, feel everything, but none of it will hurt anymore. I stared at that offered hand, at the promise of peace, and for one terrible, beautiful moment, I wanted it. No. The word came out as a whisper, then stronger. No. Because if I stop hurting, I stop caring. And if I stop caring, those 10,000 deaths mean nothing. Their suffering has to mean something, even if it destroys you. Especially then. I drew my bolt pistol, fully now aimed at his mask. Because that's what humanity is. We suffer, we struggle, we carry our dead, and we keep going anyway. Not because we're strong, because we refuse to surrender what makes us human, even when it would be easier to let go. Dominus Nihil was silent for a long moment. Then he lowered his hand. "I see." Something in his voice had changed. Not anger. Something closer to respect. "Then you are more like him than I thought." "Like who?" Vortigern demanded. "The brother I could not save." The figure turned away, and the tech priests around us stirred, not waking, but shifting like sleepers, adjusting to dreams. "I will not force this gift upon you, Cassiel Dre. That has never been my way. But the offer remains. When the weight becomes too much, when the voices grow too loud, when you finally realize that martyrdom is just another word for waste. The silent sea will be contained," Vortigern said. "No," Dominus Nihil replied. "It will spread, not by conquest, not by corruption, but by choice. Because in the end, every soul in this screaming galaxy will be faced with the same question you face now. Is the pain worth it?" He walked toward the chamber's exit, passing through the gray nights, as though they were mist. None of them moved to stop him. I wasn't sure they could. At the threshold, he paused. "One more thing, Inquisitor. The Emperor you serve, he made the same choice you just made. 10,000 years ago, when he could have simply ended his suffering. He chose to endure. To remain on that throne, feeling every soul burn, every prayer, every death. Do you know why? Why?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Because he hoped humanity would evolve beyond the need for him, that one day they would find peace on their own. The mask seemed to look at me one final time. I am that evolution, Cassiel. I am what he has been waiting for." And then he was gone. Not walking, not teleporting, simply ceasing to be present in the space he had occupied. The sanctum remained silent. The tech priests continued their work in perfect, terrible peace. And somewhere in my mind, the children of Harvest Prime began screaming again. But this time, I did not wish for silence. That night, I recorded an entry in my personal log, words I knew would be scrutinized by Kirhus, by the Conclave. Perhaps even by Terra itself. He offered me everything I have wanted for 3 years. Peace, rest, an end to the voices. I refused. "Emperor, forgive me, I do not know if I was strong, or merely afraid of what I would become if I accepted. Brother Captain Vortigern has ordered immediate withdrawal. The Grey Knights report uncertainty. Their faith remains, but for the first time in their service, they question whether faith alone is sufficient. I fear we have not fought a demon today. We have met something far more dangerous. A prophet who offers exactly what we need at exactly the cost we cannot afford to pay. Recommendation: full quarantine of the Silent Sea. No further investigation. Seal this sector and pray we can contain it. But I do not think we can. Because Dominus Nihil was right about one thing: he is not forcing anyone. They are choosing this, and that is far more terrifying than any corruption. The reports began arriving 3 weeks after our withdrawal from Veneris 9. I sat in my sanctum aboard the Eternal Vigilance, now returned to Scintilla orbit, reviewing pict captures and testimony logs that painted a picture I desperately wished was fiction. The Silent Sea had not remained contained. It was spreading not through conquest or viral infection, but through something far more insidious. Word of mouth, pilgrimage, choice. The first documented case appeared on Tertium Hive, a manufacturing world 2 systems from the quarantine zone. A foreman named Aldrich Venn had somehow made contact with ships from the Silent Sea, how we could not determine. He returned to his factory floor changed, not corrupted, not possessed, simply calm. Within a week, his entire work crew had requested transfer to his shift. Within a month, production block Sigma 7 was operating at 143% efficiency. No accidents, no conflicts, no prayers to the machine god or the emperor. Just work. Perfect, terrible work. The administratum noticed first, not because they were alarmed, but because they were pleased. Efficiency ratings that should have taken decades of optimization had been achieved in weeks. The Departamento Munitorum began requesting Venn's crew for critical production contracts. It was only when an ecclesiarchy priest, Dansai priest, attempted to conduct the weekly benediction that anyone realized something was wrong. The workers did not kneel. They did not pray. They simply continued working. When the priest demanded they show proper reverence, one of them, a woman who had been a devoted member of the cult Imperium for 30 years, looked at him with eyes like still water and said, "Why would I pray to a God who demands my suffering when I have found peace without him?" The priest called for an inquisitorial investigation. By the time the black ships arrived, 800 souls had joined what they called the Order of the Gifted. I reviewed the interrogation logs with growing unease. The converts were not mad. They were not possessed. Biological scans showed no warp taint, no mutation, no signs of chaotic influence. Psychic probing revealed minds that were intact, functional, and utterly terrifyingly content. One transcript caught my attention. An interrogation of Foreman Venn himself, conducted by Inquisitor Harrow of the Ordo Hereticus. Interrogation log 447 Tertium. Subject Aldrich Venn. Inquisitor Harrow: you claim you traveled to Veneris 9. How did you bypass the quarantine? Venn: I did not bypass it. I was called. Harrow: called by whom? Venn: by the one who hears. He spoke in my fear. Not in my ears, my fear heard him first. He knew I was in pain. He knew I carried 20 years of fear. Fear of failing my quotas, fear of the overseer's lash, fear that my children would inherit my misery. He offered me freedom from that fear. Harrow: and you accepted. Venn: would you not, if someone offered to remove every anxiety, every terror, every sleepless night, would you refuse? Harrow: at what cost, Venn? Venn: there is no cost, Only clarity. I still think. I still feel joy when my work is done well. I still love my children. But I no longer fear. And that fear, it was eating me alive. Harrow, you have abandoned the Emperor. Ven, no. I've simply stopped screaming at him. For 37 years I prayed for deliverance. For 37 years he was silent. Then he came, and he answered. The interrogation ended with Ven being declared excommunicate traitorous and executed. His family was mind-wiped. His crew was dispersed across 3 different sectors. It did not matter. The Order of the Gifted had already spread to 6 other worlds. The pattern was always the same. One person made contact with the Silent Sea. They returned changed, not broken, but perfected. They spoke of the gift with the fervor of converts, but without the madness of cultists. They did not preach. They did not evangelize. They simply lived. And others watching them live, without fear, without anger, without the constant burden of imperial existence, chose to join them. The Inquisition tried suppression. Thousands were executed. Entire factory districts were razed. Black ships carried away anyone suspected of contact with the Order. But you cannot execute an idea. And the gift was an idea whose time, it seemed, had come. I discovered the true nature of their ritual through an intercepted Vox transmission, a gathering in the underhive of Tertium, where new converts underwent what they called the ceremony of voices. The recording was disturbingly peaceful. 37 individuals sat in a circle around a simple stone, a fragment our analysis later revealed of Veneris Nina's bedrock. Each person placed their hand upon the stone and spoke. I am Marcus Trell. I fear the darkness of the lower hive. I fear the gangers who took my brother. I fear I will die nameless and forgotten. I am Helena Voss. I fear I am not faithful enough. I fear the Emperor does not hear my prayers. I fear I am damned. I am Yorick Mon. I fear I am weak. I fear I will fail my children. I fear there is no purpose to my suffering. Each confession was met with silence, not judgment, not absolution, just acknowledgement. And then, when the last voice had spoken, the stone pulsed. I could see it in the grainy pick capture, a ripple like heat haze spreading from the fragment to each person in the circle. The ripple felt not only like erasure, but exchange, each soul offering a fragment of itself to the others until no one could tell where one ended and another began. They slumped. For 13 seconds they sat motionless. When they rose, their faces held expressions I had seen before. Peace. Terrible, perfect peace. One of them spoke the same woman who had confessed her fears of damnation. I no longer fear, she said simply. The voices are quiet. The doubt is gone. I am free. The others nodded. Some smiled. Most simply sat in silence, savoring the absence of the internal storms that had defined their lives. There was no demon summoning, no blood sacrifice, no pacts with the ruinous powers. Just a group of desperate souls finding relief from pain in the only place they had ever been offered it. I watched the recording 3 times before I noticed what was missing. No oath was spoken, no loyalty sworn, no banners raised. They never said thank you. They never praised Dominus Nihil as a god or savior. They simply accepted the gift as one might accept rain after a drought. Not with worship, but with quiet, profound relief. This was not a cult. Not in the traditional sense. There was no hierarchy, no dogma, No promise of paradise or threat of damnation. Just an offer, give me your suffering, and I will give you peace. Yet in the margins of the recordings, I caught fragments of something else. Whispered conversations among those who had not yet accepted the gift. They spoke of rumors, old legends from the silent sea tales of an opposite blessing, one soul passing its burden to another, willingly carrying light instead of silence. Some called it the ember, a flame that could be shared, not extinguished. Whether such a thing truly existed or was merely the desperate hope of those resisting conversion, I could not determine. And across the Imperium, billions were beginning to answer. Lord Inquisitor Kyrus summoned me to his chambers after I submitted my report. He looked older than I remembered, the shadows under his augmetic eyes deeper. Your assessment, Inquisitor Dre. We are facing something unprecedented, I said carefully. This is not corruption. It is evolution. A mimetic contagion that spreads not through force, but through appeal. Every soul in the Imperium suffers. Dominus Nihil offers them an end to that suffering. We cannot fight that with bolt rounds and exterminate us. Then how do we fight it? I had no answer. Because the truth was, I was not certain we should. The thought horrified me. 3 weeks removed from Veneris 9, and already I was questioning. Already I was wondering if Vortigern's faith and my own conviction were simply obsolete defense mechanisms against a future that had already arrived. We quarantine, I said finally. We contain. We pray to the Emperor that humanity's will to suffer for meaning is stronger than its desire for peace. Kyrus studied me with those amber sensors. You do not believe that? No, my lord, I do not. He turned to the viewport, looking out at the hive world below, trillions of souls grinding through existence, their prayers unanswered, their suffering endless. Nor do I, he said quietly. And that is why this must never leave this room. I compiled a supplemental report for Lord Inquisitor Kyrhus, documenting what we knew of the Order of the Gifted. The Order has been confirmed active on 23 worlds within 6 sectors of the Silent Sea. Conservative estimates place total membership at 400,000 souls. Actual numbers are likely far higher due to the cult's lack of formal structure, making identification difficult. Notable characteristics: no central leadership beyond philosophical allegiance to Dominus Nihil. No rituals beyond the ceremony of voices. No promises of reward or threats of punishment. Members retain full cognitive function and personality. 0 instances of violent behavior or aggressive proselytization. 100% voluntary conversion rate. Standard cult suppression protocols have proven ineffective. Executions create martyrs. Mind wiping creates curiosity. Quarantine fails because the concept itself is infectious. Recommendation: observation and containment only. Direct intervention risks triggering mass appeal through persecution complex. Alternative assessment: we may be witnessing not the birth of a cult, but the death of faith. Kyrus sealed the file immediately, restricting access to conclave extremists only. That same night, I began writing in my personal journal, a note I never finished, never sent, but could not bring myself to destroy. I dream of Harvest Prime less frequently now. The children still scream, but their voices are growing distant, faint, as though someone is turning down the volume. I did not accept the gift. So why does the silence still call to me? The conclave of vigilance convened in the deepest chamber of the Eternal Vigilance, 3,000 meters below the Fortress Cathedral's primary decks. This was a room that existed in official records only as Vault Obscurus Null, a space so heavily warded against psychic intrusion that even thinking too loudly within its walls caused physical pain. 12 inquisitors sat around a table carved from a single piece of black stone, their faces illuminated by candlelight that cast shadows like accusations. I recognized most of them veterans of the Ordo Malleus, hunters of demons, and heretics, men and women who had stared into the warp and retained enough sanity to serve. Lord Inquisitor Kirhus stood at the head of the table, his augmetic eyes cycling through spectrums of light as he surveyed the assembled interrogators. "The Silent Sea is no longer a regional phenomenon," he began without preamble. 6 weeks since Inquisitor Dre's initial contact. In that time, we have documented the following 41 additional worlds showing signs of conversion. 17 Imperial Guard regiments reporting behavioral anomalies. 3 Forge worlds where the cult Mechanicus has ceased all ritual observance. And 5 astropathic relay stations have gone silent. The last point drew sharp intakes of breath around the table. Astropaths were the Imperium's lifeline, the psychic communicators who bound together an empire too vast for conventional signals. To lose even one relay was catastrophic. To lose 5 suggested something far worse. The entity calling itself Dominus Nihil has not attacked a single Imperial asset, Kirhus continued. It has not summoned demons. It has not corrupted in any manner we can measure. Yet it is dismantling the Imperium more efficiently than any chaos incursion in recorded history. "Then we purge," Inquisitor Valdane said flatly. She was a hard woman, scar-faced and iron-voiced, known for authorizing 3 exterminatus orders in a single campaign. "Quarantine fails. We move to final sanction. Every world touched by this gift. Every ship that entered the Silent Sea. Every soul that chose peace over duty. We are discussing the deaths of billions." Another Inquisitor Moravec, a younger man with the hunted look of someone who had seen too much too soon, protested. "Loyal Imperial citizens who have committed no crime, save accepting relief from suffering. They abandoned the Emperor," Valdane shot back. "That is the only crime that matters." "Did they?" I heard myself speak before I intended to. All eyes turned to me. "Or did the Emperor abandon them first?" The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. "Explain yourself, Inquisitor Dre," Kirhus said quietly. I chose my words carefully. "I have reviewed testimony from 300 converts. Not one of them speaks of betraying the Imperium. They speak of praying for decades in some cases and receiving no answer. They speak of watching their children starve while tithes are collected. They speak of laboring in manufactorums where a single mistake means execution. Dominus Nihil did not conquer them. He simply offered them what the Imperium never could: peace. Peace is not the purpose of humanity," Inquisitor Garrus interjected. He was ancient, kept alive by augmetics and sheer stubbornness. "We exist to suffer, to struggle, to prove ourselves worthy of the Emperor's sacrifice. This gift, it removes that test. It makes us cattle. Or," I said softly, "it reveals that the test was always designed to be failed, that we have been asking people to carry burdens no human was meant to bear and condemning them when they broke." Valdane's hand moved to her bolt pistol. "Those are heretical words, Dre." Her fingers hovered on the grip, but she did not draw. Kirhus had not told her to stop, but his presence, his gaze, made it unnecessary. In this chamber, his authority outweighed even her zealotry. "They are observed facts," I countered. "I stood before Dominus Nihil. I listened to his arguments. And the most terrifying part was not that he was evil. It was that he was right. About the Emperor's suffering. About the Imperium's cruelty. About the fact that we grind human souls into fuel and call it holy. You sympathize with it, Valdane accused. I understand it, I corrected. There is a difference. Dominus Nihil is not a demon. He is not chaos. He is something we have no doctrine for a genuine alternative to the Emperor's plan. I paused, gathering courage for what I would say next. There are fragments in the oldest Mechanicus archives, myths from the dark age of technology. They speak of a being who could redistribute the essence of men as easily as one might trade tools. The texts call him the collector of breath. They say he had a brother who carried the same power but inverted not taking but giving. Where one accumulated, the other shared. The archives claim that line of givers perished long ago. But perhaps... I trailed off. Perhaps what? Kyrus prompted. Perhaps both still exist. One openly offering peace, the other waiting. A spark passed down through generations, carried by those who choose to bear others' burdens willingly, rather than have them taken. I shook my head. But these are just legends. What matters is that for billions of people, Dominus Nihil's plan is better than what we offer them. Lord Inquisitor Kyrus raised a hand, forestalling Valdane's response. Continue, Inquisitor Dre. I took a breath. The silent sea does not spread through conquest. It spreads through testimony. One person experiences the gift and returns to their world at peace. Others see them truly at peace, not drugged or enslaved or broken, and they want what that person has. It is a contagion of hope, not corruption. And the more we try to suppress it through violence, the more appealing it becomes. Then what do you propose? Kyrus asked. I propose, I said, and the words felt like treason even as I spoke them, that we consider the possibility that we cannot stop this, that Dominus Nihil is not an enemy to be defeated, but a transformation to be endured. The chamber erupted. Half the Inquisitors were shouting, accusing me of heresy, of weakness, of corruption. The other half sat in stunned silence, their faces reflecting the same horrible consideration I had just voiced. Kyrus let them rage for exactly 30 seconds. Then, his fist came down on the black stone table, the augmetic servos in his arm producing a crack like thunder. Enough. The room fell silent. Inquisitor Dre speaks a truth we do not wish to hear, Kyrus said. But she is correct. This is not an enemy we can fight with conventional means. We have tried suppression. We have tried execution. Both have failed. The silent sea grows regardless of our efforts. Then what do we do? Moravec asked, and there was genuine fear in his voice. Kyrus turned to me. You have had the most direct contact with the entity. You refused its gift. Why? I met his augmetic gaze. Because if suffering is what makes us human, then to abandon it is to abandon ourselves. The children of Harvest Prime deserve to be remembered. Their pain must mean something. If I accept peace, I betray their memory. But you admit, Kyrus pressed, that for those without such anchors, the gift is appealing. More than appealing, my lord. It is salvation. For someone who has never known anything but pain, who has prayed for deliverance and received only silence. Dominus Nihil's offer is the answer to every prayer they have ever made. Kyrus nodded slowly. Then we face not a military threat, but an existential one. Dominus Nihil offers humanity a choice: suffer for a god who may no longer hear them. or accept peace from a stranger who demonstrably can deliver it. That is no choice at all, Valdane snarled. It is damnation. Is it? I asked. I have seen the converted. They work, they love, they create. They simply do not suffer. By what measure are they damned? By the measure of the soul, Garrus said. What they have lost is invisible, but it is everything. The capacity for true faith, the ability to choose suffering for a greater purpose, the divine spark that makes humanity more than mere beasts. Or, I countered, what they have lost is trauma, and we have simply convinced ourselves that trauma is holy because we have no way to heal it. The debate raged for another 3 hours. In the end, the conclave reached no consensus, save one: the Silent Sea could not be allowed to spread further. The question of how to stop it remained unanswered. As the conclave dispersed, Lord Inquisitor Kyrhus called me aside. We stood alone in the warded chamber, the black stone walls drinking in even the echoes of our voices. You have changed, Cassiel, he said. I met something that challenged everything I believe, my lord. Change was inevitable. The question, he said quietly, is whether that change is corruption or enlightenment. He studied me with those amber sensors. You refuse the gift, yet I sense it working on you still, wearing away at your certainties, making you question. Is that not what an inquisitor is supposed to do, question? There is a difference between questioning doctrine and questioning the Emperor himself. I had no answer to that. Kyrhus placed a hand on my shoulder, an uncharacteristic gesture of familiarity. I am assigning you to a new investigation. There have been reports of a world on the edge of the Silent Sea. A shrine world called Sanctus Lacrimae. 3 billion pilgrims visit annually seeking the Emperor's grace. If the gift reaches that world, if it converts a shrine world, it would be a catastrophe, I finished. Worse, it would be proof that even faith itself cannot stand against Dominus Nihil's offer. He withdrew his hand. Go to Sanctus Lacrimae, observe, report, and Cassiel, yes, my lord. If you find yourself tempted, if the voices become too loud and the silence too appealing, I have authorized Brother Captain Vortigern to do what must be done. I understood. I was being sent not as an investigator, but as bait, a test case. If I fell, Vortigern would execute me. If I held, perhaps there was hope that others could resist as well. I understand, my lord. I was not being trusted. I was being measured. A canary in the mine sent to gauge how deep the poison went. I pray you do. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. The astropaths who have gone silent, we recovered one. Before she changed, she transmitted a final message. Would you like to hear it? I nodded through dread pooled in my stomach. Kyrhus activated a recording device. The astropath's voice emerged thin and distant, as though speaking from the bottom of a well. I have heard the Astronomicon my entire life, the Emperor's voice guiding us through the warp. But here in the Silent Sea, I hear something else. Not the Emperor's command, not his suffering, but his relief, as though he is grateful that someone has finally offered humanity the peace he could never provide. Tell them I am sorry. Tell them I am finally free. Tell them. The recording cut off. Kyrhus and I stood in the darkness, the astropath's words hanging between us like an indictment. Emperor, preserve us, I whispered. Indeed, Kyrus said, because I am beginning to wonder if he still can. His voice did not shake when he said it. That frightened me more than anything else in that chamber. 3 days later, I learned that Kyrus had transmitted a classified message to Terra itself, invoking the Eyes of the Throne protocol, which granted him direct access to the High Lords. A copy of that transmission found its way to me through channels I dare not name. To High Lords of Terra, from Lord Inquisitor, Kyrus, Ordo Malleus, Subject, Silent Sea, Containment. Status report, containment has failed. The phenomenon is spreading exponentially. Conservative estimates project 50% of Segmentum Obscurus will be affected within 18 months. Radical estimates suggest total conversion within 3 years. All conventional suppression methods have proven ineffective. Military response only accelerates conversion through martyrdom appeal. Quarantine is impossible when the contagion is ideological rather than physical. Request immediate authorization for extremist-level response. We may need to consider measures previously deemed unthinkable. The alternative is to watch the Imperium transform into something we no longer recognize. Something that no longer needs the Emperor. Terra's response when it came consisted of a single word, pending. The shrine world of Sanctus Lacrimae hung in the void like a pearl wrapped in prayer. From orbit, I could see the great processional roads that wound across its continents, paths worn smooth by billions of pilgrims over 10 millennia. Cathedrals larger than hive cities rose from the landscape, their spires reaching toward the Emperor like the fingers of supplicants. 3 billion souls visited this world annually. They came seeking miracles, absolution, or simply the comfort of standing in a place where the Emperor's presence felt real. The whole planet was a monument to faith, maintained by the ecclesiarchy with fanatical devotion. It was also, according to our intelligence, the next target of the Silent Sea. Brother Captain Vortigern stood beside me on the observation deck of the Blade of Vigilance, his Terminator armor a silent reminder that I was being watched as much as protected. The Canoness Superior has refused our request for full planetary quarantine, he said. She claims such measures would be an insult to the faithful, that the Emperor's protection is sufficient. She is wrong, I said quietly. Perhaps. Vortigern turned his helm toward me. Or perhaps faith is the only weapon we have left. Tell me, Inquisitor, if the gifted reach this world, if they convert even one cathedral. What does that say about the strength of the Emperor's grace? It says nothing about the Emperor, I replied. Only about the limits of human endurance. That is the kind of reasoning that concerns me, Cassiel. I met his eyeless gaze. Are you going to execute me, Brother Captain? Not yet. But the authorization remains active. Do not forget that. We made planetfall at the Cathedral of Eternal Vigil, the planetary seat of ecclesiarchal authority. Canoness Superior Theodosia met us in the Hall of Saints, surrounded by her bodyguard of battle sisters. She was an imposing woman, her power armor adorned with purity seals that spoke of centuries of service. Inquisitor Dre. Brother Captain Vortigern. Her voice echoed through the vast chamber. Your presence honors us, though your message disturbs. You speak of a threat to Sanctus Lacrimae, here in the heart of faith itself. The Silent Sea does not discriminate, Canoness, I said. Forge worlds have fallen, hive worlds, mining colonies. Faith has not protected them. Because their faith was insufficient, Theodosia replied. The weak fall away, the righteous endure. That is the Emperor's test, and this world has never failed it. This is not a test of faith, I said carefully. It is a test of human limits. The entity we face does not corrupt through lies. It offers genuine relief from suffering, and for those who have known nothing but pain, that offer is irresistible. Then they are weak, the canoness said flatly. And weakness is its own sin. I felt something tighten in my chest. How many times had I heard that doctrine? How many souls had I watched burn because their faith could not sustain them through impossible burdens? The Imperium called it righteousness. Dominus Nihil called it cruelty, and I was no longer certain which was correct. Canoness Vortigern interjected. We are not here to debate theology. We are here to establish defensive measures against a confirmed threat. Will you grant us authority to screen pilgrims for signs of conversion? Theodosia's expression hardened. You wish to subject the faithful to interrogation, to treat them as suspects simply for seeking the Emperor's grace. I will not permit it. Then you condemn them, I said. I trust in the Emperor's protection. The Emperor is not listening. The words burst out before I could stop them. The hall fell silent. Every battle sister's hand moved to her bolter. Vortigern's servo motors growled as he stepped closer to me. I forced myself to breathe, to speak more carefully. What I mean, Canoness, is that the Emperor's protection requires our vigilance. We are his instruments. If we do not act, how can he act through us? Theodosia studied me with eyes like chips of ice. Your faith wavers, Inquisitor. I can see it. Whatever you encountered in the Silent Sea has left its mark on you. Perhaps it is you who should be screened? She was right, of course. I could feel it, the slow erosion of certainty. The growing whisper that suggested perhaps suffering was not wholly merely habit. The children of Harvest Prime still screamed in my mind, but their voices were quieter now, distant, as though someone was slowly turning down the volume of my guilt. My faith is not the issue, I said. The threat is real. The gifted have already made contact with pilgrims from Sanctus Lacrimae. It is only a matter of time before... Before what? A new voice spoke from the shadows of the hall. A figure emerged. A pilgrim by his simple robes, but something in his eyes, that terrible perfect peace, told me what he was. Before we offer them the same choice we offer everyone, the man said. His voice was calm, measured utterly without fear, despite being surrounded by armed battle sisters. The choice to be free. Theodosia's bolter was in her hands instantly. Heretic! You dare enter this sacred place? I am not a heretic, Canoness. The man spread his hands, showing no weapons. My name was Marcus. I was a penitent. I spent 30 years flagellating myself for sins I committed as a child. 30 years of pain offered to the Emperor as prayer. And in all that time, he never once acknowledged my suffering. Your suffering was insufficient, Theodosia said. Or, Marcus replied gently, it was unnecessary. I met someone who told me that the Emperor never wanted us to suffer. That we built a religion of pain around a god who only wanted us to survive. He said that every soul could share its strength with the next, not its suffering. That was the true design before fear twisted it. And when I accepted that truth, when I let go of the burden I thought was holy, I found peace. You found damnation. Did I? Marcus looked at his hands as though seeing them for the first time. I still pray, Canoness. I still honor the Emperor. But I do not pray for him to save me from pain. I thank him for sending someone who finally could. And I have come to offer that same gift to others. Vortigern raised his Nemesis Force sword. Psychic fire wreathed the blade, but even I could see it was dimmer than it should be. The Silent Sea's influence was spreading even here. One word, Inquisitor, Vortigern said. One word, and I will cleanse this corruption. But I found I could not give that word, because Marcus was not lying. I could feel it through my empathic senses. He truly believed he had been saved. He truly felt no malice, no hidden agenda. He was simply at peace, and he wanted to share it. How many, I asked instead, how many pilgrims have you converted? Converted? Marcus smiled sadly. We do not convert, Inquisitor. We do not preach. We simply show them what we have found, and they choose. So far, 317 souls have made that choice. They have returned to their worlds, carrying the gift, and they will offer it to others, who will offer it to others still. Not through force, not through lies, but through testimony. That is heresy, Theodosia said. Is it heresy to end suffering? Marcus asked. Is it heresy to offer people relief from burdens they were never meant to carry? The Imperium teaches that humanity exists to suffer for the Emperor's sins. I teach that the Emperor has suffered long enough, that we have suffered long enough, that there is another way. There is no other way. Theodosia's finger tightened on the trigger. Wait. I stepped between them. Canoness killing him proves nothing. He is one of hundreds, thousands, millions. You cannot bolt or round this problem away. Then what would you have me do? Inquisitor, surrender this world to these parasites. They are not parasites, I said, and the words felt like treason. They are people, imperial citizens who prayed for deliverance and received silence. And when someone finally answered them, you call them damned for listening. Theodosia lowered her bolter, but her eyes held disgust. You have been corrupted. I see it now. You stand between me and a confessed heretic, and you defend him. I defend the truth, I said. And the truth is that the Imperium has failed these people. We have demanded they suffer endlessly for a God who can no longer answer their prayers. Dominus Nihil has offered them an alternative, and they are choosing it because it is better than what we have given them. Enough! Vortigern's voice was thunder. Inquisitor Dre, you will stand down. Canoness, you will execute the heretic. This is by the authority of the Ordo Malleus. But Theodosia did not raise her bolter again. Can you not feel it? She whispered. Even here in this cathedral, in the heart of faith itself. The doubt, the question. What if the Inquisitor is right? What if we have been making them suffer for nothing? That is the corruption speaking, Vortigern said, but even his voice held uncertainty now. Marcus looked at each of us, in turn his expression gentle. I am not your enemy. I am the future. And the future does not need to hurt anymore. He walked past Theodosia, past the battle sisters, who should have killed him, but stood frozen in their own dawning questions. He walked to the cathedral's entrance and turned back one final time. The offer remains, he said, for all of you. When you are ready to stop suffering, we will be waiting. Then he was gone. The silence in the cathedral was absolute. Not the peaceful silence of the gifted, but the terrible silence of people confronting a truth they could not accept. Finally, Theodosia spoke, her voice hollow. What have we become that we can no longer answer, a simple heretic with righteous fury? What has been taken from us? Nothing has been taken, I said quietly. We have simply been shown what we have been doing, and we are horrified by it. Vortigern's hand moved to his bolter. For a moment I thought this was it. This was when he would execute me as ordered. But instead he holstered the weapon and turned away. "Report to Lord Inquisitor Kyrus," he said, his voice heavy. "Tell him Sanctus Lacrimae is lost, not to conquest, not to corruption, but to doubt. The faithful are beginning to wonder if their faith is worth the price." 3 weeks after first contact with the gifted on Sanctus Lacrimae, I transmitted a status report to Lord Inquisitor Kyrus aboard the Eternal Vigilance. The confirmed events painted a picture of collapsed cathedral of Eternal Vigil. 12% of the clergy have undergone the ceremony of voices. Pilgrim traffic shows a 23% decline in traditional pilgrimage, but a 400% increase in seekers of alternative salvation. 2 squads of battle sisters from the Crimson Veil have deserted, current whereabouts unknown. Canoness Superior Theodosia has been relieved of command by ecclesiarchal authorities. Cited reason: questioning the necessity of penitent suffering. Most troubling: the great bell of St. Colmina, which has rung every hour for 10,000 years to call the faithful to prayer, has ceased ringing. Not because it is broken, but because no one can remember why it should. That night I began writing in my journal again, words I knew I would never send, but needed to record. I stood in the cathedral of Eternal Vigil today and realized I could no longer hear the Emperor's voice. Not his silence. His absence is something I have lived with for years. But the certainty that he was listening, even if he could not answer, that is gone. In its place, I hear another voice, patient, kind, offering me rest. But in the depths of that offered silence, I almost heard something else weaker, more distant. A single light insisting that one life freely given can still ignite 1,000 more. Not taking burdens, but sharing them willingly. The whispers call it the ember. Whether it is real or merely the desperate hope of those resisting, I do not know. I do not know how much longer I can refuse. Vortigern watches me constantly now. I see his hand move to his weapon whenever I speak. He knows what is happening to me. Perhaps he has always known. The question is whether I am falling to corruption or waking to truth. I fear I will not know the difference until it is too late. I found myself in the Chapel of Silence, aboard the Blade of Vigilance, 3 days after Sanctus Lacrimae fell to doubt. The chapel was empty, save for a statue of the Emperor. Not the golden god of propaganda, but the dying lord of the golden throne. His face twisted in eternal agony. I had come here to pray. But when I closed my eyes and reached for the familiar litany of devotion, I found only questions. "You look troubled, Inquisitor." I turned to find Brother Captain Vortigern at the entrance. His Terminator armor was absent. He wore only the simple gray robes of his order. Without the armor, he seemed smaller, more human. "I am always troubled, Brother Captain. It is the nature of our work." "No." He moved closer, his footsteps echoing in the empty chapel. "This is different. You carry the weight of apostasy on your shoulders. I can see it in how you look at that statue. You no longer see the Emperor. You see a man who has been suffering for 10,000 years and wonder why we force him to continue." I said nothing, because he was right. Vortigern stood beside me, both of us staring up at the Emperor's agonized face. "I received orders from Lord Inquisitor Kirhus this morning. The Conclave has reached a decision regarding the Silent Sea. Let me guess. Exterminatus on every affected world." "No." His voice was heavy. "Observation. Containment where possible. But no mass purging. The conclave believes that such action would only accelerate conversion, that we would be creating martyrs faster than we could kill them. Then they admit we cannot win through force. They admit nothing, Vortigern said. They merely delay the inevitable while searching for alternatives that do not exist. He turned to look at me. Tell me, Cassiel, have you accepted the gift? The question hung in the air like an executioner's blade. No, I said. But you want to? Yes. The admission came easier than I expected. Every day the voices grow quieter. The children of Harvest Prime scream less often. The pain that has defined me for 3 years is fading. And I do not know if that is because I am healing or because I am being hollowed out. There is a difference, Vortigern said. Is there? From the outside, healing and corruption look the same. Both remove pain. Both change who you are. The only difference is which authority declares the change legitimate. Vortigern was silent for a long moment. Then, I was at Armageddon, Third War. I fought demons that wore the faces of my brothers, that spoke with voices I had known since I was a neophyte. I killed them anyway, because I knew with absolute certainty that what wore those faces was not human anymore. And now, I asked. And now I have met the gifted. I have spoken with them, interrogated them, searched for the corruption, the possession, the taint. And I found nothing, just people who no longer suffer, who work, who love, who live, but without fear. He paused. I do not know if they are still human, but I also do not know if suffering is what makes us human, or if it is simply what we have always known. I stared at him. That is close to heresy, brother captain. I know, which is why I called you here. Not to execute you, but to ask, what do we do when the enemy is not evil, but merely offers a better life? Before I could answer, the chapel's Vox system crackled to life. All senior officers to the bridge. Immediate. We have a situation. The situation was Dominus Nihil. He appeared on the main view screen as we entered the bridge, not through hololithic transmission, but as though the screen itself had become a window into wherever he stood. The masked figure stood in what looked like a cathedral, but the architecture was wrong. Too perfect. Too peaceful. Greetings, Brother Captain Vortigern. Inquisitor Dre. His voice filled the bridge calm and measured. I apologize for the intrusion, but there is something you need to see. We will not negotiate with you, Vortigern said, his hand moving to his force sword. I am not here to negotiate. I am here to show you the truth. The view shifted, panning across the cathedral. It was filled with people, thousands of them, from every walk of Imperial life. Workers in manufactorum coveralls, Imperial guardsmen still wearing their uniforms, tech priests with their augmetics gleaming, ecclesiarchy priests in robes of devotion, all of them at peace. This is the Cathedral of Ending Pain, Dominus Nihil said. It stands on what was once the hive world of Meridian. Population 14 billion. Chaos corruption rate 47% before I arrived. Now, the view panned back to him. Zero corruption, zero crime, zero suffering. The people work, they create, they love. They simply do so without the burden of fear. You have enslaved them, Vortigern said. Have I? Nihil gestured, and one of the figures approached a woman, middle-aged, wearing the uniform of an Imperial Guard sergeant. Ask her yourself. The woman looked directly at the screen. Her eyes were clear, unclouded. When she spoke, her voice was steady. My name is Sergeant Mara Kell, 3rd Meridian Armored. For 20 years I served the Emperor. I watched friends die. I executed deserters. I burned heretics. And every night I dreamed of the things I had done and wondered if the Emperor even knew my name. And now I found myself asking. Now I still serve. But I serve because I choose to, not because I fear what will happen if I stop. I still remember the people I killed. But the guilt no longer eats me alive. The doubt no longer keeps me awake. She smiled, not the manic grin of the possessed, but something gentler. I am free. And if that is slavery, I choose it over what I had before. The screen shifted back to Nihil. I have given them what the Imperium never could agency. The choice to suffer or to let go. Nihil's voice softened. Some call what I do taking. But I do not take anything they do not freely offer. I remove burdens they beg to release. Most choose to let go. Some, like your Inquisitor Dre, choose to carry their burdens. I honor both choices. Then why show us this? Vortigern demanded. Why not simply spread your gift in silence? Because I want you to understand, Nihil said. I am not your enemy. The Imperium is its own enemy. It has built a civilization on suffering and called it holy. It has made pain a sacrament and guilt a virtue. I am not destroying humanity. I am saving it from itself. By removing what makes us human, I said. By removing what you convinced yourselves made you human. Nihil's mask seemed to focus on me. Cassiel, you refuse the gift because you believe your suffering honors the dead of Harvest Prime. But ask yourself, would they want you to suffer forever? Would those children, if they could speak, demand you carry their screams for the rest of your life? Or would they simply want you to remember them? The question struck like a bolt round, because I had never asked it. I had simply assumed that to stop hurting was to dishonor them. I see doubt in your eye. Nihil continued. Good. Doubt is the beginning of wisdom. You do not have to accept the gift, Cassiel. But you must accept the truth the Imperium has been making you suffer. Not because it makes you strong, but because a population in pain is easier to control. Fear is the Imperium's greatest weapon. I simply offer to remove it. And in doing so, remove our will to fight, Vortigern said. Your peace is a prison. Is it? Nihil tilted his head. Or is your war the true prison you have been fighting for 10,000 years? And in all that time, has humanity come any closer to peace, to safety, to rest? Or have you simply learned to call the cage duty and the bars honor? The bridge was silent. I could feel it, every officer, every crew member wrestling with the same question I had been fighting for weeks. Was suffering sacred, or was it simply familiar? I will give you a choice, Nihil said. Both of you, not an ultimatum, not a threat, a choice. Continue as you are hunting, fighting, suffering in the name of an emperor who can no longer answer you, or accept that there is another way. That humanity does not have to hurt anymore. And if we refuse, Vortigern asked. Then you refuse. I will not force you. I will not corrupt you. I will simply wait. Because eventually, everyone who suffers long enough asks the same question. Is this pain necessary? And when they realize the answer is no, they come to me. The transmission ended. The bridge remained silent. I could hear my own heartbeat loud in my ears, could feel the weight of every eye upon me. "Inquisitor," Vortigern said quietly. "Your orders," I realized with a start that he was asking me. Not telling me, asking. As though he no longer trusted his own judgment. I turned to face him. My orders are to continue. To fight. To suffer if we must. Not because suffering is holy, but because the alternative is surrender. And if we surrender, if we accept that peace is worth any price, then we admit that everything we have sacrificed meant nothing. "Even if we are wrong?" Vortigern asked. "Especially if we are wrong. Because if we are wrong, then at least we will have failed while trying to preserve something worth preserving. If Dominus Nihil is right, if the Imperium truly is a prison of pain, then let us be the guards who refuse to abandon our post even unto death." Vortigern studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. "The Grey Knights will stand with you. But you still doubt," I said. "Yes, as do you." He turned to the crew. "Set course for Terra. The High Lords need to hear what we have seen. They need to decide whether the Imperium fights or surrenders." As the ship turned, I felt something break inside me. Not my resolve. Something deeper. The certainty that I was on the right side. The belief that suffering had meaning. I had chosen to fight, but I no longer knew what I was fighting for. I recorded what I knew would be my final log entry. The last words before whatever was coming arrived. "I have made my choice. I will continue to serve the Imperium. I will continue to hunt the gifted. I will continue to suffer. Not because I believe it is right, but because I do not know what I would become if I stopped." Dominus Nihil offered me peace. He offered me rest. He offered me freedom from the voices that have haunted me since Harvest Prime. I refused. Not out of faith, not out of duty, but out of fear. Fear that if I accept his gift, I will discover that everything I have done, every soul I have killed, every world I have burned, was for nothing. That I have been the villain all along, enforcing a system of institutionalized cruelty in the name of a God who wanted nothing more than for us to stop suffering. I do not know if the Emperor would approve of my choice. I do not know if he even hears me anymore. But I know this: I am human not because I suffer, but because I choose to bear witness to suffering, to remember the dead, to carry their names even when it hurts. That may not be wisdom, but it is all I have left. The war is coming. Not between the Imperium and the gifted. Between those who believe suffering has meaning and those who believe it does not. I have chosen my Zeitfasser. Emperor, forgive me, I am no longer certain it is the right one. 6 hours later, a transmission arrived from Terra. Priority absolute. Lord Inquisitor Kier Hughes summoned me to his chambers to hear it. His face was ashen as he activated the holo display to Lord Inquisitor Kyrus from High Lords of Terra, Re-Silent Sea Protocol. Your request for unthinkable measures has been received and evaluated. The Senatorum Imperialis has reached a decision. The Silent Sea is to be designated Existential Threat Maximus. All conventional containment is to cease. Prepare for deployment of the Cataclysm Protocol. The Emperor protects, but first he purges. The transmission ended with an authorization code I had heard of only in whispered legends among the Inquisition Omega Null Throne. Permission granted directly from the Golden Throne itself. The deployment date remained classified. Even Kyrus did not know when it would begin. We knew only that it was coming. The war fleet assembled in the void. Above Scintilla, like a constellation of death. 60 capital ships, 300 escort vessels, enough firepower to crack a dozen worlds. And leading them all, the apocalypse inevitable, a Retribution-class battleship that had served in the Gothic War, bearing scars from battles that predated my birth. Its captain was Lord Admiral Constantine, a man whose face looked like it had been carved from stone by a particularly angry sculptor. Inquisitor Dre. His voice crackled through the Vox as I materialized aboard the bridge via teleportarium. Welcome to the Emperor's final mercy. I looked out at the view screen at the assembled might of the Imperial Navy. What are your orders, Admiral? Simple. He gestured to a hololith displaying the Silent Sea 47 worlds marked in crimson. We burn them all. Every world touched by this gift. Every station, every ship. We reduce them to ash and pray that ash cannot spread. Those are Imperial citizens, I said, though I knew it was futile. Loyal subjects who committed no crime except accepting relief from pain. They are vectors, Constantine said flatly. A plague that walks on two legs and speaks with human voices. We have our orders from Terra. The Cataclysm protocol is clear. When conventional containment fails, we employ unconventional purging. Exterminatus, I whispered. On 47 worlds simultaneously. 53, actually. Lord Inquisitor Kyrhus emerged from the shadows behind the Admiral's command throne. He looked like he had aged decades since I last saw him. Analysis indicates 6 additional worlds showing early-stage conversion. We cannot risk waiting for confirmation. 53 worlds, I repeated numbly. Estimated population. 12 billion souls, Kyrus said. Give or take. The number was too large to comprehend. Larger than Harvest Prime by 3 orders of magnitude. I had ordered the deaths of 10,000. And their screams still haunted me. How does one bear witness to 12 billion? There must be another way, I said. There is not. Kyrhus stepped closer, his augmetic eyes dimming as though he could not bear to look at me with full clarity. Cassiel, I know what this means to you. I know what it will cost. But if we do not act, the Silent Sea will consume Segmentum Obscurus within 2 years, and then it will spread beyond, to Segmentum Solar, to Terra itself. And if we destroy 53 worlds, what then do we stop the idea of peace by killing everyone who accepts it? We stop the vector, Admiral Constantine interjected. The entity Dominus Nihil requires human minds to spread his influence. No minds, no influence. He is not a virus, I protested. He is an existential threat to the Imperium, Kyrus finished. The High Lords have spoken. The Cataclysm Protocol is authorized. The only question remaining is whether you will bear witness to it, or whether Brother Captain Vortigern will have to carry out his final orders. I turned to find Vortigern standing at the entrance to the bridge. His Nemesis 4 sword was drawn, its psychic fire burning low but steady. His posture spoke of duty, but his eyes, those human eyes, within that armored helm, held something else. Regret. Cassiel, he said quietly, I have walked beside you through the Silent Sea. I have seen what it does, and I have heard your doubts. But doubts are not heresy. Actions are. If you attempt to interfere with this fleet's mission, I will kill you. Not because I believe you are corrupt, but because I have been ordered to, and I am Grey Knights. We do what must be done. The weight of his words settled over me like a burial shroud. I could stop this. I could use my inquisitorial authority to countermand the orders, at least temporarily. But doing so would be treason. And Vortigern would cut me down where I stood. And even if I succeeded, what then? The Silent Sea would spread. The Imperium would fall, not through conquest, but through conversion. Through people choosing peace over suffering. Was that worth preventing? I will not interfere, I said finally. Vortigern lowered his sword fractionally. Your word, Inquisitor. My word as an Inquisitor of the Ordo Malleus. I will bear witness to the Cataclysm Protocol. I will not attempt to stop it. I met Kyrus's eyes, but I will also bear witness to what we become when we choose murder over mercy. And I will remember every soul we kill in the name of an emperor who may no longer want us to kill for him. Kyrus nodded slowly. That is all any of us can do. The fleet translated into the Silent Sea at over 400 hours ship time. I watched from the observation deck of the apocalypse inevitable as real space tore open and vomited forth 60 capital ships bristling with cyclonic torpedoes, virus bombs, and lance batteries. The first target was Veneris 9, the world where I had first encountered Dominus Nihil. Target acquired. Admiral Constantine's voice echoed across the fleet-wide Vox. All ships prepare for simultaneous launch on my mark. The Emperor protects. The Emperor avenges. Fire. The void lit up with fire. Cyclonic torpedoes, weapons designed to crack a world's crust and ignite its mantle, streaked toward Veneris 9 like falling stars. 60 warheads, enough to kill a planet 12 times over. I watched them fall, watched them detonate, watched the world's surface erupt in chains of thermonuclear detonations that would eventually merge into a planet-wide firestorm. And I felt nothing. No, that was a lie. I felt everything. I felt the deaths of every soul on that world. 800 million people, workers and families and children, all burning. My empathic senses, usually screaming with the pain of the dying, registered only silence. They did not scream. They did not pray. They simply accepted, as though death was merely another burden they could lay down. Target Veneris 9 confirmed kill, Constantine reported. Moving to secondary targets. The fleet split, each battle group assigned to a different world. I watched through the tactical hololith as world after world died. Meridian, Tertium, Sanctus Lacrimae, the shrine world where faith itself had failed. 12 billion souls extinguished in a coordinated purge that would be remembered as either the Imperium's salvation or its greatest sin. And through it all, I heard nothing. No psychic screams, no pleas to the Emperor, just silence. The same silence Dominus Nihil had promised me. Cassiel. Kyrus appeared beside me, his face illuminated by the glow of dying worlds. Are you intact? Define intact. Do you believe we are doing the right thing? I laughed a sound without humor. No, my lord. I believe we are doing the necessary thing, which is worse. Because at least villains believe in their cruelty. We know ours is monstrous, and we do it anyway. Then why not stop us? I turned to face him fully. Because Dominus Nihil was right about one thing humanity cannot survive without suffering. Not because suffering is holy, but because it is the last proof we are still human. If we accept his gift, if we choose peace over pain, we become something else. something perfect, something that no longer needs gods or duty or sacrifice. I gestured at the hololith. We are burning 12 billion people to preserve the right to suffer. That is either the greatest tragedy in human history or the greatest act of defiance. And you believe? I believe I will carry these deaths until I die, just as I carry Harvest Prime. And perhaps that is the point. Perhaps the only way to honor the dead is to let them wound us, to refuse the comfort of forgetfulness. Kyrhus was silent for a long moment. Then, the fleet reports 93% of primary targets eliminated. Remaining worlds are... The Vox system screamed with feedback. Every screen on the bridge flared white, and a voice calm, patient, unbearably kind, filled the ship. Hello, Admiral. Lord Inquisitor. Cassiel. Dominus Nihil. He appeared on the view screen not as a hologram, but as though the screen itself had become a window into wherever he stood. Behind him I could see hundreds of people, the converted still alive, still calm, standing in what looked like the remains of a cathedral on a burning world. I watched you destroy 53 worlds, Nihil said. 12,374,612,809 souls. I felt each one die. Do you want to know what they felt, Tor? Heresy. Admiral Constantine reached for the Vox controls, but they would not respond. Peace. Nihil continued, as though the Admiral had not spoken. They felt peace, even as the cyclonic torpedoes fell, even as their cities burned, because I had already removed their fear, their pain, their suffering. He tilted his masked head. You sought to kill the idea by killing the carriers. But ideas do not die, Admiral. They spread. And you have just created 12 billion martyrs who died without fear. We stopped you, Kira said. Your strongholds are ash. Did you? Nihil gestured, and the view shifted. We saw worlds, hundreds of them scattered across the sector. Worlds we had not targeted. Worlds where people stood in silent ceremonies, touching fragments of stone from Veneris 9. For every world you burned, 10 more have heard of the gift. For every soul you killed, 100 more. Now ask, why did they die peacefully while we suffer? Then we will burn those worlds too, Constantine snarled. How many can you burn, Admiral? Nihil asked softly. 100, 1,000. At what point do you realize you are not fighting corruption, but murdering your own people because they chose something better than what you offer them? I found my voice. You knew this would happen. You wanted us to use the Cataclysm Protocol. I did not want it, Cassiel. But I knew you would. Because the Imperium has only one response to change violence. You cannot imagine a universe where humans do not suffer so when offered one you destroy it. He paused. But destruction teaches as effectively as mercy. Every world you burn shows the survivors exactly what the Imperium values: control through pain. And every day more people ask themselves, is this the God we want to serve? The transmission cut. The bridge was silent, save for the alarms reporting that 53 worlds were now lifeless rocks. Lord Admiral Constantine stood frozen at his command throne. Lord Inquisitor Kyrhus stared at the view screen as though it had physically struck him. And I laughed. Truly laughed for the first time since Harvest Prime. Because Dominus Nihil was right. We had not won. We had not even slowed him down. We had simply proven his point in the most devastating way possible. Later in my quarters, I wrote what I knew would be my final report. Not to Kyrus, not to the Conclave, but to whoever might someday need to understand what happened here. The Cataclysm Protocol was deployed as authorized. 53 worlds were rendered lifeless. 12 billion souls were extinguished. The Silent Sea was purged with fire. And it did not matter, because Dominus Nihil does not spread through conquest. He spreads through testimony. And we have just given him the ultimate testimony: the Imperium will kill billions rather than allow them to stop suffering. I do not know if that makes him right or us wrong. I know only that I am standing on a ship that has just committed the greatest massacre in modern Imperial history, and I cannot feel anything but exhaustion. Not grief, not rage, not even guilt. Just tiredness. Perhaps that is his final gift. Not peace, but the erosion of our ability to feel anything at all. If that is victory, I do not want to see what defeat looks like. 3 months after the Cataclysm Protocol, I stood once again in the Silent Sea. Not as an investigator, not as an inquisitor, but as a pilgrim. The Blade of Vigilance had brought me here against Lord Inquisitor Kyra's explicit orders. Brother Captain Vortigern stood beside me on the observation deck, his armor scarred from battles I could no longer remember caring about. "You know what I must do if you accept the gift," he said quietly. "I know. And you came anyway." "I came," I said, watching the void where Veneris 9 had once orbited, "because I need to understand. The Cataclysm Protocol killed 12 billion people, and the Silent Sea spread faster than ever. We burned 53 worlds, and 100 more converted. Everything we do to fight this makes it stronger. So before I continue serving an Imperium that murders its own citizens for choosing peace, I need to hear his answer to one question." "What question?" "What happens next if he wins? If the entire Imperium accepts the gift and stops suffering? What then?" Vortigern was silent for a moment. "Then, you should not have come alone." "I didn't." I gestured to the squad of gray knights standing in the shadows. "You're here. Your brothers are here. And I suspect Lord Inquisitor Kyrhus is monitoring this transmission, even though he pretended to forbid it." A soft chime on the box confirmed my suspicion. Kyrhus's voice emerged tired and old. "Inquisitor Dre is correct. I am observing. Not because I approve, but because I need to know the same answer she does. Dominus Nihil, if you are listening, and I suspect you are, we request parley." The void rippled. Space itself seemed to fold, and suddenly we were not looking at the debris field of a dead world, but at a cathedral that should not exist. It stood in the vacuum, impossibly intact, filled with light that had no source. And in its center, Dominus Nihil waited. "Welcome back, Cassiel Dry." His voice filled the ship without touching the Vox systems. "Lord Inquisitor Giras, Brother Captain Vortigern, you come seeking answers. I will give them freely, because I am not your enemy. I have never been your enemy." "You are destroying the Imperium," Kyrus said. "No." Nihil spread his hands. "The Imperium is destroying itself. I am merely offering survivors an alternative to the pyre." "Then answer Inquisitor Dre's question." Vortigern set his hand resting on his force sword. "What happens if you win? If every human in the galaxy accepts your gift? What becomes of us?" Nihil was silent for a moment, as though considering how to explain something obvious to children who could not see it. "You become," he said finally, "what you were always meant to be. Not servants of a dying God, not fuel for an endless war, but simply alive. You work because work gives you purpose, not because overseers threaten you with execution. You love because love brings joy, not because the ecclesiarchy commands you to breed. You create because creation is beautiful, not because the administratum demands quotas. You remove our will, I said. I remove your trauma. Nihil's mask turned toward me. Cassiel, you have carried the screams of Harvest Prime for 3 years. They have defined every decision you make, every moment of your existence. You call that strength. I call it a wound that never heals. I offer not to make you forget those children, but to remember them without the pain, to honor them without being crippled by guilt. And if I refuse that honor, I asked, if I choose to carry the wound, then you choose. Nihil's voice softened. That is what you have never understood. I do not force anyone. I offer. You may refuse. Many have. You did 3 months ago aboard this very ship. And I respected that choice. But you knew, Kairos interjected, that the Imperium would use the Cataclysm Protocol. You knew we would burn those worlds. You wanted us to. I knew you would show the galaxy exactly what the Imperium is, Nihil corrected. An empire that would rather commit genocide than allow its citizens to stop suffering. That was not manipulation, Lord Inquisitor. That was truth. I simply gave you the opportunity to demonstrate it. So this is revenge, Vortigern said. For whatever the Imperium did to you. For the brother you could not save. Nihil turned toward the Grey Knight. This is not revenge. Revenge requires hatred, and I no longer hate. The Imperium did not make me what I am. It showed me what I needed to become. You built a civilization on the principle that suffering is necessary. That pain makes you strong. That sacrifice is holy. And for 10,000 years, no one questioned it, because there was no alternative. And you are the alternative, I said. I am the proof that it was always unnecessary. That humanity could have rested, could have healed, could have been kind to itself. But the Emperor chose differently. He chose to endure, to make all of you endure with him. And now 10,000 years later, his children are so broken by that endurance that they call peace a disease. The words hung in the silence of the void. I have a question, I said finally. The Emperor, you claim he wanted this, that he's relieved someone finally offered humanity peace. Is that true? Or is that simply what you tell yourself to justify what you're doing? Nihil tilted his head. Does it matter? Yes, I said fiercely. Because if the Emperor truly wants us to accept your gift, then everything I believe is a lie. But if he doesn't, if you're wrong about his will, then you're not offering salvation. You're offering comfortable damnation. Then ask him yourself. The cathedral's light brightened, and suddenly I could feel it, a presence, vast and terrible, and old, burning like a dying star at the center of the galaxy. The Emperor, not speaking, not commanding, but watching. He is always watching, Cassiel, Nihil said softly. He has been watching you scream yourself awake every night for 3 years. Watching you hate yourself for Harvest Prime. Watching you drive yourself toward death because you believe suffering is the only way to honor the dead. And do you know what he feels when he watches you suffer? What? I whispered. sorrow, not because you are weak, but because he cannot help you, cannot ease your pain, cannot offer you rest. He is trapped on that throne, burning 1,000 souls a day just to remain conscious, and all he can do is watch his children torture themselves in his name. Nihil stepped closer. I do not claim to speak for the Emperor, but I know what he would say if he could stop. Please, my children, stop hurting. I did not want this for you. You're lying, Vortigern said, but his voice shook. Am I? Nihil turned to him. Brother Captain, you have served the Emperor for a century. You have killed in his name, bled in his name, watched your brothers die in his name. And in all that time, have you ever felt his love, his pride, his approval? Or have you simply felt duty and called that faith? Vortigern's hand tightened on his sword. Faith is enough. Faith in what? Nihil pressed. In an emperor who cannot speak, cannot save you, cannot even die. You worship a corpse, brother Captain. A magnificent, terrible corpse that should have been allowed to rest 10,000 years ago. And you call that loyalty? Enough. Kyros's voice cracked through the vox. Dominus Nihil, you have made your case. Now hear mine. You offer peace. You offer rest. You offer an end to suffering. But you offer it to beings who have been defined by suffering for so long that we no longer know who we are without it. You ask us to trust you, to believe that what comes after the pain is still human. But you are asking us to make that choice blind, with no evidence except the testimony of those who have already changed. Then let me offer evidence, Bas, Nihil said. He gestured, and a figure stepped from the shadows of the cathedral. A woman in the tattered robes of an Imperial Guard sergeant. I recognized her from the transmission months ago, Sergeant Mara Kell. Tell them, Nihil said gently. Mara looked at me with clear, calm eyes. I was at Kadaya. I saw the Great Rift open. I watched demons pour into real space and tear my regiment apart. I executed 17 of my own soldiers for corruption. I survived by putting a bolt round through the skull of my best friend when she started hearing the whispers of Slanesh. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the weight of memory beneath it. For 20 years after Cadia, I woke up screaming. I drank. I hurt people. I tried to die and failed. And then I heard about the gift. And you took it, I said. I did. And do you know what happened? I still remember Cadia. I still remember my friend's face when I pulled the trigger. I still carry every death I caused. But now, she touched her chest. Now I can carry them without drowning. I can remember without reliving. I honor the dead without letting them destroy me. You're still human, Vortigern asked, and I heard genuine uncertainty in his voice. More human than I was before, Mara said. Because before I was just a wound that walked. Now I'm a person who has been wounded and survived. She stepped back into the shadows. Nihil turned to us. That is what I offer. Not forgetfulness, not servitude, not the death of the self, but the ability to heal from wounds that the Imperium tells you must never heal. The ability to remember the dead without being haunted by them. The ability to serve not out of fear or duty, but out of choice. I felt tears on my face. When had I started crying? I need time, I said. You have all the time you need, Cassiel. The offer never expires. Return to the Imperium. Continue your service. Continue your investigation. Continue carrying your burden. And when you decide, if you decide that the weight has become too much, I will be here. And if I choose to fight you, I asked. If I decide that suffering is what makes us human and your gift is damnation disguised as mercy, then you fight, Nihil said simply. And I will not stop you, because the choice itself is sacred, Cassiel. More sacred than faith, more sacred than duty. The choice to suffer or to rest. That is the only true freedom humanity has ever had. The cathedral faded. We were back aboard the Blade of Vigilance, staring at empty void. Kyrhus's voice emerged from the Vox shaken. Inquisitor Dre, Brother Captain Vortigern, return to Scintilla. We have much to discuss. The conclave convened one final time, not in the warded chamber, but in an ordinary meeting room, as though we no longer trusted wards to keep out the one thing we truly feared: doubt. The question before us, Kyrus said, is not whether Dominus Nihil can be stopped. We know he cannot. Not through violence, not through faith. The question is whether he should be stopped. The chamber erupted in shouting. Valdane demanded immediate exterminatus on every world showing signs of conversion. Moravec argued for dialogue. Garrus called for mass mind wipes. And through it all, I sat in silence, remembering Marakel's face. Finally, Kyrhus raised a hand. Enough. Inquisitor Dre, you have had the most contact with the entity. What is your recommendation? I stood, 12 pairs of eyes fixed on me. My recommendation, I said slowly, is that we stop calling it an entity. Dominus Nihil is not a demon, not a Xenos threat. He is a mirror. He shows us what we have become, an Imperium so addicted to suffering that we call peace a disease. So dependent on fear that we cannot imagine loyalty without it. So broken that we would rather burn 12 billion of our own citizens than let them stop hurting. So you advocate surrender, Valdane said. I advocate choice, I corrected. Dominus Nihil offers people a choice: suffer for the Emperor or accept peace. And we, the Inquisition, the Imperium, the entire edifice of human civilization, we tell them that choice itself is heresy, that they must suffer because suffering is what the Emperor wants. I paused. But what if he doesn't? What if the Emperor never wanted any of this? What if we built a religion of pain around a god who only wanted us to survive, and we mistook survival for sanctification? Those are dangerous questions, Inquisitor, Kyrus said quietly. They are the only questions that matter, my lord. Because if we cannot answer them, then Dominus Nihil has already won. Not through force, but by making us confront what we are. The conclave dissolved without reaching a decision, because there was no decision to reach. The Silent Sea would spread, or it would not. People would accept the gift, or they would refuse. And the Imperium would either adapt or die. For my part, I returned to my quarters and wrote a final entry in my personal log. I have not accepted the gift. But I no longer know if refusing it makes me strong or simply stubborn. The children of Harvest Prime still scream in my dreams, but their voices are fainter now. Not because I have forgotten them, but because I am learning that memory and torture are not the same thing. Dominus Nihil told me the offer never expires, that I can choose at any time to lay down my burden and rest. I do not know if I will ever accept. But I know this: the fact that I can choose, that the choice itself exists, has changed everything. Because for the first time in 3 years, I am carrying my pain, not because I must, but because I choose to. And choice, not suffering, is what makes us human. The Emperor protects, or so we tell ourselves. But perhaps what he truly wants is for us to protect each other, to be kind when we can, to rest when we must, to remember that we are more than the wounds we carry. I do not know if Dominus Nihil is right, but I am no longer certain he is wrong. And in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, even uncertainty feels like hope. In the years that followed, the Silent Sea continued to spread, slowly, steadily, not through conquest, but through testimony. World after world, person after person, making the choice between suffering and peace. The Imperium did not fall, but it changed, quietly, imperceptibly, until one day historians would look back and wonder when exactly the change began. Some say it began on Veneris 9, when an inquisitor met a prophet and refused his gift. Others say it began on Terra, when the first whispers reached the Golden Throne and the Emperor, if he still listened, heard his children asking a question he could not answer. Do you truly want us to suffer? But Cassiel Dre, who lived through it all, believed it began the moment she realized that carrying her pain was a choice, not a commandment. And that choosing to carry it did not mean others were wrong to lay it down. In the end, Dominus Nihil's greatest victory was not in converting the Imperium, but in teaching it that conversion was possible, that there were alternatives to endless war, that even in the grim darkness, humanity could still choose. And that choice, however small, was enough.